All right, let me introduce my panel of guests this morning. With us in the studio right now is Zorian Cross. He's a theatre artist. Also, Nolan Lewis is joining us from Bombay. He is India's participant at Gay International. Mohammed Mushtaq Ahmed, who's the chairperson of All India Sunni Waqf Board, will be joining us shortly. My colleague Ankit Gupta is here with us in Headlines Today studio. Also, Jaskira Singh Bawa reporting from outside Supreme Court. Jaskira, let me come to you first and try and understand the legal battle that has been going on for 12 years, began in Delhi High Court, and today we could see a culmination of these arguments, the debate that has raged on furiously in Indian society for almost 12 years, ever since that case was first brought up in the court. Take us through the possible outcomes that we could see in an hour or two.
What the Delhi High Court did back in 2009 was not to strike down the Section 377 of the Indian Penal Code, but to water it down. They separated conduct which is homosexual and consenting in nature from Section 377. The ambit of Section 377 is a lot wider than just homosexual conduct. It actually goes on to bestiality and also other unnatural offences considered unnatural during the Victorian era colonial law, which is when it was actually implemented. So what the High Court did was separate the homosexual consenting conduct from Section 377, thereby decriminalizing that kind of a conduct. Now, when we had almost 15 different petitions which were filed over here in the Supreme Court. Most of the prominent petitioners over here are various religious organizations and faith-based organizations who had approached the Supreme Court. So what we are really expecting today is, based on the arguments that took place in the Supreme Court back in February and March of 2012, the Supreme Court will be looking into whether or not the High Court judgment which separated the homosexual consenting conduct from Section 377 of the IPC was good in law or not, but also will be looking into whether or not the law also evolves along with the change in society,
right,
and whether or not the state, to simplify it for our viewers, the state has any business interfering in the consensual conduct of two consenting adults within their own privacy.
Very, very interesting. Just come back to you in a moment. Let me go across to Zorian Cross, who is with us here in our Delhi studio. Zorian, as we today now count down to this verdict which is coming out from the Supreme Court in a short time from now, what is the mood right now in the LGBT community? You've worked very closely with them right now. Are they expectant?
Well, a lot of us are incredibly nervous because this entire verdict could rule whether we can be legal citizens in the country or not. A lot of us are pretty hopeful because this has been a battle we've been fighting since over a decade and a half. And I think this year we had a 6th Gay Pride Parade in Delhi where we had about 1,500 people, which was twice the number of people marching last year. And more straight people in our families and in our society are helping and supporting us. So it's not just the LGBT community, but it's anyone who's on the side of human rights and on the side of humanities expecting a very positive outcome. Anything else would just be a travesty.
Anything else would be a travesty. Well, it remains to be seen what the ruling of the Supreme Court is. Let me go across to Nolan Lewis. He was India's participant at Gay International. Nolan, I'd like to know from you, what is it like for gays in India to come out, really? Because you've participated at an event, and obviously everybody in your neighborhood, your friends, the people in your society you interact with now know that you are a gay.
Well, I think it's a very different story now that I have participated in the pageant, but coming back after the pageant, going to maybe a grocery store, speaking to my neighbors, they've all been very accepting and all very warm. I think it's also because the media has changed the perception of gay men and lesbian women all across the country. They've been portraying us in a very positive light.
All right, just stay on with us for a moment more. We have on the phone line right now with us Onir. He, in fact, is the filmmaker who had made My Brother Nikhil, one of the first gay-based theme film in India. Onir, your views today as we could be looking at a very historic verdict coming out of the Supreme Court.
An extremely historical moment. It could be an historical moment for independence and human rights in India, and I'm really hopeful that the Supreme Court stands up for the Delhi High Court verdict and gives us our basic constitutional right towards equality and against discrimination.
Right, and just a word more about the societal acceptance, really, because that's another battle altogether. Right now, we're looking at whether this could be decriminalized or not, but the stigma that really is associated with it, to battle that out will take another few years at least.
I think stigma is not going to go overnight, but what this does is, once you're empowered legally, I think it empowers the community to stand up for its rights. And I think it's a very, very important step. And I think it won't disappear overnight, the stigma, but this will go in a long way to empower the community for the basic democratic rights.
All right, Anil, thank you very much for joining us. That was the director of My Brother Nikhil joining us on the phone. Well, clearly the mood really expectant right now from the Supreme Court. Let me go across to Ankit Gupta, my colleague. Ankit, well, you know, a country that actually has almost 1/5 the world's population, it is about the rights of people in this country. And that is exactly what perhaps the Delhi High Court in its ruling had also indicated, that it isn't just about gay rights, it's about human rights.
Absolutely, Ruchika. The most important thing that needs to be remembered, that this is, as much as this is about gay rights and the queer community in the country, this is a battle for human rights. The first human rights and one of our fundamental rights, the primary one, is the right to equality. This is the battle to be considered an equal citizen in your own country. This is what this whole battle of 2 decades is about. You know, I work a lot with NGOs, various NGOs who work within the community, and one thing that a lot of people have come back and said, that a lot of parents are ready to accept their children to be queer. But the basic question that they ask, if it is okay to be gay, then why is it illegal? That is the question that everybody wants the Supreme Court to answer today. Why is it illegal to be something that you were born with? And, you know, a lot of people call it to be unnatural, or, you know, so on and so forth. The fact is, if you exist in nature, it is natural.
All right, Ankit, well, those views that will find a lot of resonance today. But let me go across right now to Mohammad Mushtaq Ahmed. He's the chairperson of the All India Sunni Waqf Board. Mr. Ahmed, I'd like to know from you, there are several arguments that have been given by those who had petitioned the Supreme Court, those who had challenged the Delhi High Court verdict, and they had talked about, you know, how homosexuality is some sort of illness, it's a sort of perversion, some even called it unnatural, some call it Western influence. Are you confident today that these arguments will hold in the court of law? मिस्टर अहमद, अगर आप तक मेरी आवाज़ आ रही है, आपसे जानना चाहती हूँ कि कितना कॉन्फिडेंस है वक्फ बोर्ड को और जो सब पिटिशनर्स हैं जो सुप्रीम कोर्ट में गए थे दिल्ली हाई कोर्ट के ऑर्डर को चैलेंज करने के लिए, कि आप एक तरह से कामयाबी मिलेगी आपको कि क्रिमिनलाइज्ड रहेगा, सेक्शन 377 स्ट्राइक डाउन नहीं होगा और गे सेक्स जो है उसे क्रिमिनल ही तरीके से ही देखा जाएगा?
एक मिनट इधर।
All right, there appears to be some trouble with that line. We'll try and fix that audio line with Mohammad Mushtaq Ahmed. He's the chairperson of the All India Sunni Waqf Board. But let me go back to Jaskirat for one more time and try and understand really the role that the government has played here, because I believe the centre has also taken U-turns on this issue when it was in the Delhi High Court, and later now that it's moved to Supreme Court, various ministries who had to give their view. And the court itself had earlier talked about that how it is actually the business of the legislature to amend laws, which is why, is there a possibility that the court may actually throw the ball into the government's court?
Well, there's always that kind of a possibility, and I'm glad you asked me that question because it's very important to actually spell out the government of India's stand. Now, very important to note that the Delhi Commission for Protection of Child Rights has actually opposed homosexual conduct, has opposed the High Court order, while the Union of India actually submitted an affidavit through the Attorney General of India saying that criminalization of homosexuality is a colonial era concept, that there was absolutely no concept of criminalization of homosexual conduct before the Victorian colonial era that was actually there in India after 1857, after 1860s, and 1860s when the Indian Penal Code was of course implemented. But before that, the Indian society, pre-colonial Indian society, was actually more tolerant towards homosexual conduct. But the government in the same affidavit also put the ball in the Supreme Court's words, quote pun intended, suggesting that the court has to now decide on the legality and has to take this further. Supreme Court was very critical. Let us understand this. Actually, these arguments took place within a month after the 2G verdict, where the Supreme Court had decided on the 2G license cancellation, but the government had said this is a judicial overreach. Now, in this case, the Supreme Court said, now you are asking us to decide on these things, which the legislature should be deciding on, and then you tell us that this is we conduct ourselves in judicial activism. So that was the criticism that came out of the Supreme Court. We'll have to wait and watch whether the Supreme Court actually takes a call on this or throws the ball in the government's court.
Just stay on for a moment more. We have, I think, Mohammad Mushtaq Ahmed back with us. He's the chairman of the All India Sunni Board. Ahmed साहब, आपसे जानना चाहूंगी कि इसको आप लोगों ने होमोसेक्सुअलिटी को अपोज करते हुए इसको बीमारी कहा है, इसको वेस्टर्न इन्फ्लुएंस कहा है. क्या आज आप होपफुल हैं कि सुप्रीम कोर्ट आपकी गुहार सुनेगा?
जी बिल्कुल, जो बात है उसको सुनी जाएगी और
Apologies for that.
के लिए और इंसानियत के फायदे के लिए फायदा होगा.
और इंसानियत के नाते देखना होगा, और यही आर्ग्यूमेंट है. अगर आप देखें तो एलजीबीटी कम्युनिटी का, एक्टिविस्ट का भी यही आर्ग्यूमेंट है कि अगर आप इसे ह्यूमन राइट्स के नजरिए से देखते हैं तो आप इसे कैसे अपोज कर सकते हैं? अहमद साहब, आपको मेरी आवाज आ रही है?
नहीं, कुछ क्लियर नहीं हो पा रहा. क्या आप पूछ रहे हैं?
मैं आपसे जानना चाहती हूं कि अगर आप इसे ह्यूमन राइट्स के नजरिए से देखते हैं तो आप इसे कैसे इनकार कर सकते हैं कि ये एक ह्यूमन राइट्स का इशू है. एक लार्ज पार्ट ऑफ योर पॉपुलेशन है जो चाहती है कि इसको आप क्रिमिनलाइज नहीं कर सकते हैं. तो ह्यूमन राइट्स के नजरिए से आप इसे किस तरह से अपोज कर रहे हैं?
भाई देखिए, जो इंसानियत है, इंसानियत के नफ़े के लिए, जो फ़ायदे के लिए जो चीज़ें ईश्वर ने, अल्लाह ने बनाई है, जब उस चीज़ के ख़िलाफ़ होगा तो लामाला ऊपर वाला भी नाराज़ होगा. और इंसानियत के ख़िलाफ़ जब कोई अमल किया जाता है तो हम ये बात अच्छे तरीके से समझते हैं कि इंसानियत में बिगाड़ पैदा होता है. और यही आज सबब बन रहा है कि जो बुराइयां जन्म ले रही हैं और जो इंसानियत के अंदर बिगाड़ पैदा हो रहा है, तो ये इसकी सबसे बड़ी वजह यही है कि उसके हुकूक के और उसकी रियायत नहीं की जा रही है.
All right, Maulana Saab, thank you for joining us. Let me now quickly go back to Zorin. Zorin, you tell me, as we today look at this verdict from the Supreme Court, this battle, if it's won today by the activists and the people from the LGBT community, what next? Do you think it will shape criminal jurisprudence in a way? Several other issues like gay marriages is something that the LGBT community could fight for?
Well, the short version is yes, because this is going to be like a major step for the entire LGBT community if the Supreme Court rules in our favor. However, more than anything, I think this will more or less be a victory of tolerance and acceptance more than anything else. I mean, if you look at history in general, religious groups have found one section of society to always make the enemy, whether it was women at one point because women weren't allowed to vote, women weren't given the same kind of human rights. And look at the feminist movement and the amount of legroom it's made for women all over the world. Then it was against ethnic minorities all over the world. Every country has had its battle with various ethnic minorities. And now that human rights has given them their share of legalities, now the target is the gay people. I mean, look at what Putin's doing in Russia in the hope of, trying to make Russia more traditional and not be too influenced by Western concepts.
Right.
Putin's going so, well, apeshit crazy about it. Sorry for swearing. But nevertheless, in India, if you think about it, our culture has actually been very acceptance of people of various sexualities.
And that is very interesting, because the fight, if we see, most people have pitted culture against rights. And that is what makes it very interesting, Ankit, isn't it? Because on one hand, you have people who say it is just not a culture. On the other side, there are people who say, hey, it's our right.
That is the interesting thing. Most people who give you that culture argument actually don't know anything about the Indian culture. If you go back to the 4th century, Vatsyayan wrote Kama Sutra. That is 4th century I'm talking about. There are several chapters in the Kama Sutra which deal specifically with homosexuality. If you go to Khajuraho, you find statues which depict homosexuality. Our Indian mythology is full of homosexual instances, from Vishnu taking the avatar of Mohini, turning into a woman, and Shiva being attracted to him as a woman, and then they having a love child. I mean, seriously, that is religion in our country. country for you. Our country was built on the basic tenet of inclusiveness. It was not exclusiveness. Neither is Indian Constitution. It is built on the primary basis of including everybody within the country. So, you know, I don't understand this culture argument at all.
All right, so clearly there is no meeting ground as far as these two arguments are concerned. We are certainly hoping that the Supreme Court will today deliver its verdict on this rather contentious subject. The controversial Section 377 of the Indian Penal Code, whether that will be struck down, whether gay sex will be decriminalized. We'll continue to talk about that and follow the big story all day here on Headlines today. For the moment, Zorian Cross and Ankit Gupta. Apart from that, Mohammad Mushtaq Ahmad, Onir and Jaskirat, thank you for joining us. We'll of course continue to speak to you.